Welcome to The B Word, a women's lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Katie Ploss. I'm a school psychologist, women's wellness coach, a doula, and the founder of BU, a women's wellness community. I created The B Word to share my stories, knowledge, and training to help you navigate the everyday challenges of being a woman. We discuss everything from navigating dating and relationships, parenting, building a career, to just finding what you're passionate about and figure out who you are meant to be. At The B Word, we aim to destigmatize mental health challenges, grow, heal, and empower you to be your most authentic self. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The B Word. I am so excited for today's episode, and the topic that we are diving into today is one that I have had requested many times on the show in past seasons, and I have been really reluctant to cover this topic. And it's because it's such a not that this show isn't personal. I was going to say this is a really personal topic. We do cover a lot of personal topics, of course, on this show. That's what it's all about. And I am not surprised that I've gotten a lot of requests for this because I think fertility and loss and grief from loss of miscarriage or having infertility is something that a lot of my listeners can relate to. But it's such a raw and sensitive topic that I just have really been reluctant to do it because the last thing I would ever want to do is trigger anybody especially with this topic. And I wanted to do a pretty decent trigger warning before you dive into this week's episode, because we are going to be covering a story about loss and fertility, but we're not going to just talk about the story. We're also going to talk about how you cope with loss and how you cope with the anxiety of the unknown around infertility. And I think that this is going to be a very individual experience for everybody, and everybody listening to this episode will have a different perspective on it because of their own personal experiences. So what I want to say, and the disclaimer that I want to make as you're listening to this is just one woman's experience. It may not be your experience. This may be very validating to you. This may be very triggering to you. So if that fertility and loss and grief is something that is very sensitive to you, I recommend that you take a lot of care in listening to this episode. Nothing in this episode will be very graphic or overly descriptive or anything like that. When I say triggering, I think maybe just more in the way of maybe feeling a certain way about how people might cope differently with the same experience. So I just want to say again, this is one person's experience. This is an approach that worked for one person. This is not to replace the advice of medical professionals. This is not to negate your experience, especially if you are someone that is currently going through IVF or is experiencing fertility treatments in any capacity right now. This episode is in no way, in my perspective, negating your experience with that. And the IVF experience did not work for this guest, but that does not mean that I'm endorsing that it wouldn't work for anybody. So again, please listen to this with the approach that we are talking about one woman's experience. I hope that it lands on the right ears for the right people that need to hear it. But if that doesn't align with you, you just can press pause, press stop, come back to it later, or just leave this episode if it doesn't align with where you're at right now. That said, I do think, and I'm going forward with this episode because I think that this has been requested so many times now, and it is something that is really important to address and acknowledge. And I certainly don't want to minimize or ignore anyone's experience with infertility and loss. So with that said, our guest today is named Karla Levit, and she is a grief, healing, and hope after loss coach. And she has had her own experiences with IVF failure and coping with getting pregnant after loss. And she works with her clients on how to prepare their bodies for, getting pregnant and staying pregnant and being healthy throughout the process. And I think that regardless of what your own experience is, I hope that there is something that you can take away from the conversation that Karla and I had. I walked away from the conversation feeling really inspired, and I felt really good about it. So I hope that you enjoy listening to it. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to Karla. Hi, Karla. Welcome to the B Word. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. I think this is going to be a really good one for our listeners today. And I clued everyone in before you joined me, but I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us what you do. Tell us about your story, what you're passionate about, and why you're here today.
So, I'm Karla. I'm a mom and a wife and an entrepreneur. I spent 20 years working on Wall Street, and last year took a leap of faith and decided to follow something I'm deeply passionate about. I became a certified health and wellness coach with a focus on pregnancy and conception. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this work is because I suffered through pregnancy loss and infertility for almost a decade that include failed rounds of IVF. So this work means so much to me because I know there are such gaping holes between healing and medicine. And I know that there are so many women who are affected by infertility and pregnancy loss, and that society doesn't do a good job of supporting us, and that many of us suffer alone. The more we share our stories and our collective stories, it really helps to remove the shame, the guilt, and the trauma that most of us really do alone. So that's really what I'm passionate about.
Awesome. And it's amazing work. And as my listeners know, I'm a doula. I'm very passionate about women's health. I'm really passionate about having successful, healthy, happy pregnancies and postpartum experiences. And I know that a lot of my listeners are going into their 30s, and there's a lot of talk about fertility in this period of life. People are getting pregnant, having babies, trying, struggling, and there's so much isolation and stigma about struggling with conception and fertility and going through IVF, especially right now. I'm sure you're very aware of everything going on in the media about IVF and just the controversy around IVF and fertility right now. So I think this is a really important topic to have and to talk about, especially with everything going on. And if you're comfortable sharing a little bit of your story, and I know you talked about that this is something that you've personally gone through, can you tell us a little bit more about that and your experience with, especially with grief and your going through loss with your pregnancies?
My husband and I got married, and we didn't expect to get pregnant so quickly, but we did. And it ended very tragically for me. My daughter, Paloma, she was born still at 23 weeks, so 5.5 months pregnant. And it was something that I just never, ever expected to go through. And the trauma and the pain that I went through and the suffering that continued for almost 10 years is just something that's really hard to explain. I never really knew what I wanted to do career wise. I just followed the money. And what was really heartbreaking is that the thing that I wanted most that I've known is that I wanted to be a mom. And to have this happen and lose my daughter in such a tragic way really, it broke me. It brought me to my knees. And it was a pain that I ran from for a very long time. And I didn't realize for a long time that I was, not able to heal properly because I never really did the work to heal myself. I never dealt with the pain and the trauma that I was holding. And it really affected my fertility in the subsequent years. I struggled. I gave birth to our second daughter, Isabella, 2 years after my stillborn. It was a miracle that she was even born because the amount of stress and trauma that I had, it was a miracle that I was able
Yeah.
to give birth to her. But I continued to struggle through more miscarriages. And my OB, him and I are very much trauma bonded and who I trusted, I trusted him completely. He said, at your age, you need to try IVF. You don't have very much time. And so I trusted him, and everything was supposed to work. I had 23 eggs, 3 PGT tested embryos. My lining was perfect, everything that I needed to have this be successful, and it didn't work. And I knew that intuitively when I walked in. I felt that this wasn't my way, but I had given all of my power to the doctors, and I didn't really know what to do at that point.
Especially when they tell you're running out of time. I feel like women get coached to this, whether it's through your doctors or through society in general. If you're running out of time to find a husband, running out of time to be a mom, have a career, whatever it is, we're always running out of time. And so that doesn't really help the stress part of it too, especially and then this was after you were grieving, right? Like the loss of your first pregnancy that you were able to conceive with no intervention. And that it's just so disempowering, the position that you're in, that you were specifically in walking into your IVF experience too.
Yes, I felt the pressure. I felt the pressure of the pain and the trauma, and I was scared to death that this was going to happen again. And I
Mhm.
didn't have time on my side. At 35, I was already considered a geriatric pregnancy on top of high risk and of advanced maternal age.
Mhm.
Now, I think language matters,
It does.
right?
I agree. So I was just thinking as you were saying that, I'm like, God, what a way to describe it.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And it makes me feel like it put me on my heels before I even started again, right?
Mhm.
And I was carrying all this pain and this trauma and this fear. I was literally having panic attacks as I walked into my OB's office. And then to have all the labels, it made me even more fearful. And stress hormones are in direct conflict with the hormones you need to produce a pregnancy.
Mm.
The amount of cortisol that was pumping through my body, I can't even imagine. And that's why I really think I struggled. I think I struggled for a lot of different reasons, but that certainly was something that impeded my progress in getting pregnant.
And I think a lot of women too that have gone through infertility for a long time have that hear that message too. How do you balance the two things when you're working with women of that it is valid that these cortisol and like these stress hormones may be impacting your ability to get pregnant, but it's not so simple of just saying don't be stressed because this is such a stressful, traumatic experience that you're walking through. There was so much grief and heavy emotions. Like how do you balance that with women that are struggling with fertility to just not simply saying, "Don't be stressed," but also
Yeah.
validating them.
Yeah. I think when you say don't feel stressed, you're automatically going to get stressed.
Yeah, it's stressful. It's, "Oh my god, now I have to control my stress. I'm stressed. That stresses me out." Exactly.
It is. It's progress, not perfection. We acknowledge what we're feeling and we give it its space.
Yeah.
And we give ourselves grace and we do our best. And that's all we can do. We don't need to put any more pressure on this journey. We have enough pressure to contend with. We have enough of our own demons in our mind, you know? And really, I think I like Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've ever heard of him,
I haven't.
but he talks a lot about rewiring your brain and being aware of your subconscious programming. And also he talks a lot about visualization techniques. And for me, in order to deal with the stress of going to doctor's appointments or on my journey to pregnancy, I would envision and play these mental movies to prepare myself so that when I was actually in that moment, it felt a bit familiar and it wouldn't be so scary. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Right.
And I did that through the IVF process. Although it didn't work for me, that's a different story, but it did help to calm my nerves and my anxiety. And also having the right support system in place is super important. My husband, he really stepped up. It's so much mentally and physically to contend with. And he played his part. He was my nurse through the process, and that really took a lot of pressure off of me. So I think that was really important to have the right support. And also during my IVF process, there was a support group. And I think that was the first time I had ever joined a support group. And I think it was only because we were in the pandemic at that time that it was on Zoom. So it was just so easy to jump on. And the women in that group were so supportive, the sharing of experiences to be understood and to share your knowledge and feel supported was so important during that time. And it's something that I have currently right now in my program as well. I host a free online support group where women can come together and share their experiences because there's so much power in community.
So much power. And honestly, I don't talk about that enough on my show, and I should. Because even when I think about when I was moving through a lot of my trauma and grief, we can be grieving for all different reasons, but it's so powerful to be in a support group with people that are moving through and grieving through something similar to you that can almost be a mirror to yourself, and it's so validating. It's so incredibly validating. And even what you were saying earlier about just being with it and just allowing some of these big these this the stress or the big feelings or the anxiety or the fear or whatever. And there's a term I got taken from my past coach, and I use it with my clients, and it's name it to tame it. And
Yeah.
sometimes, like, to validate and calm the body, you're just naming it and calling it out instead of denying what you can feel is there. And that's what support groups do too, is that they give people that tangible opportunity to do that. And it's so validating, and it just brings so much peace. And so I think that's so important, especially with infertility or IVF, where it is so isolating and you feel like you're shouldering a lot of blame and
Yeah.
responsibility for what's going on, to just feel super validated instead of hearing, don't do this, come do this treatment, and just getting all of these directives to do instead of just how to being able to take your power back and know how to be and how to be authentically yourself and what path you need to go on. Support groups cannot, I really need to talk more about them because they're so powerful. I think that's great that you're doing that.
Yeah. And just those two words, me too. I know what that feels like. I know your pain
Yeah.
and you're not alone because I think we feel so alone in this journey. It's very isolating for
Hmm.
a lot of different reasons. There's so much social stigma with infertility and pregnancy loss. It's taboo. And it makes your healing that much more difficult because when you're suffering alone, you're so isolated, and that really leads to more mental health issues. And so it's a really tough road.
Yeah. So, how did you ultimately take your power back and step into your narrative once this IVF process didn't really work for you? You did not, did you get pregnant through IVF?
No, I
Okay.
didn't. So I would love to say that I stepped into my power on my own, but I did not. When the third transfer did not work, I just knew that we could not stretch ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally, and financially any longer.
Mhm.
And so when my RE really called to tell me that there was no more options besides doing another round and that I needed a surrogate, that was my moment. That was the catalyst to my change because he said to me basically, spend another 30K for a chance for the lottery per se, right? Because there's
Mhm.
no guarantees to IVF. And
Right.
I knew that I didn't trust him. I didn't trust him anymore. And the only person that I needed to trust was me. And so that's when I stepped into my power. When he gave up on me and really gave me no viable options, is when I said, enough.
Mm.
Even though I have no guarantees that I will be able to grow my family, I choose me. I choose my life, my happiness, my mental sanity over doing this again. And that really led me down my path of healing and empowerment. And so I used everything that I've learned in 10 years to get back on that path of healing. And I have a three-pillar approach to my program, and it's prepare your body. And that is really all about the proper nutrition and supplements and taking the environmental aspects, everything that affects our hormones. You have to take all of that into consideration. The smallest of things can have an impact on your hormones. And I think like there are so many things in our foods too that we're not aware of. We
Mm.
don't really know what's in our foods and how that affects our bodies and our hormones. And number two, I'm really big into mindset, prepare your mind. And I did that through meditations and visualizations. I began to picture myself pregnant. For a long time, I was withholding. I did not allow myself to envision another baby, to envision a pregnant belly, to envision what having another child in my family would look like, because I thought that I was going to jinx myself. And so I was doing the exact opposite of what I needed to do. I needed to energetically connect to this baby, but I needed to allow the flow to actually happen, right? And so I began to visualize what this baby would look like. And it was always the same vision. It was a little boy. And it's so funny that I have a son now, and we're very women heavy in my family and in my husband's family. Strong, strong women, very opinionated. And so I would always kind of giggle when I would think, oh, a little boy. Yeah, right, Karla. But I let myself go there. And it was always this little boy, pre-toddler, leaning forward, not really learning how to walk or run. And I realized today, when I was out in my backyard with my son, that was my vision. I had seen this already because I allowed it to actually come to fruition. I allowed that energy to flow out for me. I began to picture it and I connected with it. And I don't call him my miracle baby, I call him my magic baby, because it was a mind, body, and soul connection that really brought him to me. And it's a testament to this work that we do have the ability to heal our body and heal ourselves with the proper support.
Absolutely. And I think too, there's this sense, and what I'm hearing, almost of like surrender. I think
Oh, yeah.
when we are going through an experience like IVF, and I could compare this to like somewhat this concept to like other big milestones in your life that you're trying to achieve. When you grip it so
Mhm.
tightly and you're so
Yes.
afraid that you're not going to achieve it, and you're just trying to
Yes.
manipulate and do every little single thing and play this puppeteer that you think is going to achieve where you're going, and that doesn't work, and you hit this wall and you're so frustrated or you're so like blinded by grief, and then you just surrender and you say, you know what? Not that the end goal isn't worth it, because it is. You want the
Yeah.
thing, but this and the way that this is causing such dissonance in my body and my mind, this isn't how life is supposed to be. And so when you surrender to that and you let that part of it go and you just are willing to accept and be open, and then the thing comes to you and you're like, and I've had this experience too, not with fertility, but in other areas in my life, and it makes me laugh because I'm like, I really didn't have to I think I made it harder for myself at the end of the day. I didn't cause the things that happened to me to happen, but I think I made it harder for myself. If I just would have been open and I just would have surrendered to what is, then I would have been able to accept the support, the tools to use the strategies. It's amazing how everything kind of starts to fall into place. But I think when you're in that place of grief and you're in that fear, it's really hard to access that surrender.
Oh, oh, yeah. Because that would require you to drop from your mind into your heart.
Mhm.
Up here in your mind, you can control things. In your heart,
Mhm.
you can't. You have to feel them. And surrender has been a word that has plagued me for a very long time. And recently had a conversation with a friend of mine who owns a yoga studio, and she said to me, Karla, surrender is let go or be dragged. And it clicked in my mind because exactly how you described it at that moment, I had to let go because I was just being dragged. And I thought I was in control, but I was not in control. And stepping into the unknown is what really opened all of this up for me and brought my little blessing. But that took
Absolutely.
a lot of courage, a lot of courage.
And you're able to access the tools like and you're talking about in your program, and it sounds like you're with these 3 pillars and you are preparing the women that you work with to have a successful conception. If you're preparing your body and you're
Mhm.
taking the supplements, I could do a whole series on that doctors don't promote these things enough, and I'm doing now, like, I've recently been diagnosed with PCOS, and I want to start trying to have a baby in probably the next year and a half, and so
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of research about supplements, preparing my body, balancing my hormones. What am I eating? How am I moving my body? And there are strategies and there are tools and there is research out there, But it is so interesting how, like, when I just go to a regular doctor, they're just like, "Oh, just don't eat any sweets and go to the gym and you'll be good." And I'm like, "No, I think there's actually way more nuance to women's hormones and what can really help promote that balance." And they're just not telling us that, and we're really having to be our own advocates to figure that out. And so it's this, like, very precious balance of surrendering and, like, letting the feelings come in and letting go so that you can access the tools and the strategies and really adequately prepare yourself and do the right activities. It's so hard. It's seriously the hardest thing I think women have to go through.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It's a balance between them both, right?
Mhm.
You do what it is that you can do, like by preparing your body and preparing your mind and finding the proper support. Those are all three things that you can do
Mhm.
to help you along this journey. And then the rest is you have to surrender to,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Absolutely. We just can't be in control of every single thing. And I think so many women are afraid of the pain, of the grief, of not achieving or not the possibility of never having a baby or never having. And I really had to surrender in my own story with my trauma. I really had to surrender to the idea of maybe I would never have the life I envisioned. Maybe I never would. If you're someone that when you're giving up on IVF, you to some point have to surrender. Maybe I won't have a baby naturally, or I won't be able to carry a pregnancy. And that sounds so painful to surrender to. And it is to really go through that. It is painful and there is a ton of grief. But once you're on the other side of that, you're like, I'm still standing. Like I'm still here and I still can create a life that feels authentic to me. And then, like we're saying, once you really surrender to that, then you do end up manifesting this thing that you were trying for so hard and gripping so tightly all along. But I always say it happens when you least expect it. It's such a lame way of saying it, but it's because that's when people surrender, it typically happens for them because they're not gripping it so hard.
Yeah, because you're open. You're open to the possibilities.
Mhm.
What if it turns out better than you could have ever imagined?
Yeah.
What if you find the courage to step into the unknown? What if? When I surrendered after the failed rounds of IVF, I really focused more on what I did have as opposed to what I didn't have. What I did have was a loving husband and a beautiful little daughter and my beautiful little dog.
Yeah.
And I had a beautiful life. Maybe it wasn't what I had envisioned for myself. And it wasn't exactly perfect, but it was mine. And there was so much to be grateful for. So I really leaned into that as well. And I really think it's important. And I talk to the women that I work with about this, finding the glimmers.
I love the
What are the
glimmers. Can you
glimmers?
explain the
Yes.
glimmers for people that don't know? Because I love this concept.
Yeah, it's like when you're so heavy in grief or in sadness or you're just sad. It's finding the little moments that bring you happiness.
Mhm.
It could be like there was just amazing full moon the other night, just looking at the moon and being like, wow, that's so beautiful. Or taking a little walk outside and letting the sunlight hit your face. And when you're struggling through infertility, thinking about how your husband has stepped up to support you. Just those little things and giving those things their moment
Mm.
and letting that emotion run through you, that feeling of gratitude. I'm grateful for that little moment. And things may not be what I want or what I envision, but I'm so grateful for the things that I do have. And I'm open to what the universe has in store for me.
Mhm. Do you ever have women that either come to you or that you work with that are like, what do you say to women that are in such resistance? Because I think we've all been there if you've been through trauma. You're in a there is no I've never talked to anybody that's been through this experience that at some point wasn't like fuck that and fuck you. I can totally imagine there is someone that is struggling with fertility that's like, fuck that. I can't I way too resistant. I can't let go. I cannot surrender. I This will be successful. I will it to be true. What do you say to a woman that's in that mindset right now?
Stay the fuck this fucking infertility.
Yep.
Feel that
Yep.
because that's part of the process. You're
Mhm.
feeling it. You're resisting, but you're feeling it. You're pissed off. You're like, why the hell is this happening to me? This is so freaking unfair. You're
Mhm.
angry. I was angry for a very long time. And I suppressed it and suppressed it, and I was just eating me alive.
Mhm.
But if you're no longer numb, then you're beginning to feel things and you're on your way to progress.
That is progress.
Progress, not perfection.
It is
We don't have to be
progress.
perfect. We can be who we are in every phase of our life and give ourselves grace. I think we're so hard on ourselves. The expectation of women in this world, it's impossible. It's impossible. A woman, and I know plenty of women who are resistant, trust me, that I'm dying to help. I'm just like, listen to me, please. I was there. I can see where you are. Like, so fucking help you if you would let me, but I'm going to let you be. I'm going to let you know that I'm here for you, and I'll wait for you until you're ready. Stay there, feel what you need to feel, because you won't be there forever. Nothing is forever. And when you're ready, you have to be ready to do this work. This is not something that you can be coaxed into or pushed into. You know when you're ready, just like everything else in life. Like, tuning into your intuition is so important, and that's something that I learned as well. I felt so strongly in many different places on this journey that I was not on the right path. And I took the medical community or the so-called professionals' opinion over mine, over my intuition, over what I knew was right for me. And that's something that I really learned too, that I think is so important, not only stepping into your power, but trusting in your intuition and learning to tune into that and letting that lead you. Let your heart lead more than your mind all the time, because that is how you connect to what it is that you really want.
Mhm. I think that was the most shocking thing for me when I started to pursue coaching was this concept of I didn't have to struggle with my mind so much. And I've been in therapy and coaching off and on for I don't know, 15 years now, maybe more than that. Probably no, more like 20 years. And I was so shocked when I would be in this resistance and my heart was like very resistant or very angry and I was feeling all these really big things. And my coach would just invite me to just stay there. And I was like, and it's almost like a toddler when like they know they're not supposed to be doing something. And then it is really your inner child that you start negotiating with. But they're like, oh, okay, just go ahead. Just be as mad for, and what, and you start to ask, like, how long should I be in this? My coach would be like, as long as you need to. There is whenever you decide that you're done, we'll be here and the work will be here and the next step will be here. So that's up to you. And I think giving yourself that power back of you get to be pissed off, you get to be resistant, you get to decide is empowering even if you're still resistant and you're not totally bought into this whole concept of like positive thinking and surrendering and mindset work and that more of this spiritual aspect when you're talking about your fertility because like you said the medical field is in such resistance to this, right? Like this isn't what they're preaching by any means.
I think my RE would have been like, that's a bunch of horseshit.
Mhm.
I had a list of questions for him. And going back to supplements and preparing your body to, I was like, what supplement should I take? Because there's not enough data to support that. It would take
I
a
just
little
had this
longer.
conversation with a doctor literally
Yeah, like
3 weeks
what?
ago and I'm like,
Yeah.
so here's this whole list of supplements that
Yes.
I want to start trying in a year. What do you think? She's like, I mean, really, if we could just put you on metformin, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna do these supplements. Or then she was like,
Yes.
maybe vitamin D, and I'm like, okay, yeah, vitamin D is fine. I live in Michigan where there's absolutely no sunlight for 6 months of the year, so yeah, I'm vitamin D deficient, so that's fine. But there's
Everybody
so
is
much
vitamin
more.
D
Everyone is. I
deficient.
know.
Everybody is.
I started laughing. I was like, yeah, sure, well, that's fine. But there's so many supplements for our hormones that I know and I've been reading so much about, but it's like, it infuriates me that we have to do so much of our own advocacy and our own research. But that's really the state of women's health. The medical field just isn't really endorsing the studies and the findings that some of these supplements and these balances. And then you also, unfortunately, you have also a lot of people in the health and wellness coaching field that are absolute quacks that are telling people like incorrect information. And so I feel like like a lot of women get stuck in this middle of like, I don't want to listen to these like crazy people that have no idea what they're talking about. I also want to trust my doctor, but I don't, and my intuition is telling me something's wrong and they're not giving me all the information. And you just feel so lost and so isolated and it's so frustrating. And it's like where did you start with that? Like when you were moving into, I should say, trusting your intuition. and doing your own research to prepare your own body.
Really, it was an experiment for me.
Yeah,
Right?
it is. I feel like I do.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm experimenting
Yeah.
with so many things.
Scary. I don't
I
think we should have
know.
to experiment. I
I
mean, they
know.
should fund studies to help support women's health, but you know this, it's severely underfunded and inaccessible to most people. And doctors really don't seem to put a lot of care into women's health in
I
general. It's a
know.
sad state of affairs, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it was an experiment for me.
Yeah.
It was an experiment. And more than anything, I used my experience that I had. 10 years of this, 10 years of trial and error, 10 years of trying this, trying that, learning, researching, asking questions, and then implementing some of the things that I learned. It was an experiment and it worked. That's why I think you're right. There are a lot of people who shouldn't be in this space. But for me, my experience has taught me so many things that a doctor would never tell you or show you. And my work is to really guide women to their own healing. Everyone's healing is so extremely personal, just like their grief is in their journey with healing. Everybody's journey is so different. But what I do say to women out there is that my experience has led me to this point. My pain has turned into my purpose. And that is why I'm so passionate about sharing what I've learned to help women along this journey, because it is very isolating and it's overwhelming, especially when the doctors don't really give you any direction. It's very blasé. It's, oh yeah, try this or try that. And it's, no, this is my life. This is my body. You're not listening to me. It's just like you're just another number. So that's where you really have to take control of your fertility journey specifically. You got to do the research and you have to try different things. And there's certainly labs that can be run, basic fertility labs where your general practitioner can run for you, except the doctors out there don't really make this available. They don't talk to you about it. They don't. Women are very unprepared for this journey, especially now that women, a lot of us are having delayed conception. We're not having kids at 21 or 17. We're wanting to have careers and enjoy our lives and travel and have different experiences. So most of us are starting to have children later in life. And so medicine needs to catch up with that. And they're definitely not. So that's why people like me can help you along this process using the 10 years of experience and everything that I've learned. There's this, it's called post-traumatic growth. And I guess it's a phenomenon or a new concept. It's when you turn your wounds, when you come out the other side, out of your darkest days, and you turn your wounds into wisdom, and it leads you down a new path of self-discovery. And that's exactly where I am, right? My wounds have turned into my wisdom, and it's led me down a whole new path of discovery. I've learned so much and had my mind opened and my heart open to what is actually possible. And my experience with my doctors has not been positive. It has not been uplifting. It has not been encouraging. It's been everything. It's been the opposite of that. And that was very discouraging for me because all I wanted was a baby. And I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel respected. I didn't feel heard. And I had to step into that, taking my power back, becoming my own best advocate to get to where I want and have a family that I knew I deserved. And now I have that. And I couldn't be more happy. I'm grateful for everything that I've learned. I wish that my daughter, Paloma, was here with me today, 100%. But I know that she's here guiding me with this work. And I feel her presence so strongly.
Yeah. And I love this concept, and I'm going to read more about this because I feel that I'm also on this path too. But I remember when I was coming out of my darkest days, and I'm very like woo spiritual, and I was
Me too.
I think I was getting a tarot reading, and the tarot card reader said, "You're on this path of turning your pain into power, and it's going to be really powerful for a lot of people." And I was like, huh. And it really stuck with me. And this whole concept of turning your pain into power. And I think it does take you on this journey where not only do you find all this healing, but then you feel called. So many people feel called to support others through their experience. So, what would you say for a woman that do your clients that you work with, do they start with you for planning conception? Do they start with you when they're moving through infertility? Like, how do most of your clients find?
I have different clients. For a while, I was working with women who had experienced a loss
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's a little different than never being pregnant from your
Mm-hmm.
first. It's different after you have a loss because you're
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of pain and trauma and fear that's very much trapped in your body, and so it's a different experience. But my sister, she's 41 and she's not sure if she wants to have a baby. There's a lot of women that I know, they're around my circle, circling my practice, who aren't sure if they want to have a baby, but want to be prepared and want to know how to best prepare themselves. So my practice is very open to all different clients. And my message is always pretty much the same. Every person's different, everyone's healing journey is different. But as I mentioned to you before, it's my signature 3 pillars. It's prepare your body, prepare your mind, and find the right support. I think that's really leads to a successful fertility journey.
That's awesome. And for the 3 pillars, like, are clients working through modules? Are they working through courses? I know you have a support group. What does the like, how do you structure that?
Yeah, right now I have one-on-one coaching and we work through modules.
Cool.
Yeah, it's 12 weeks and I haven't mentioned yet, but I really want to mention this. I'm hosting my first healing retreat in Costa Rica. And it's
Oh,
yeah, it's something that I am so incredibly excited about it because it's something that I've been dreaming about for such a long time. After I lost my daughter Paloma, a friend of mine had taken me to a yoga retreat, and it wasn't anything specific to infertility or pregnancy loss, but it was a very healing experience for me, and it was the first time that I'd felt like myself again, which was really important to feel alive again, to feel like myself. And so I really wanted to recreate this, but specifically for women who are suffering through infertility and pregnancy loss, or women who want to prepare their bodies for this journey. And so we're going to have different healing modalities. We are going to do Reiki sessions. We're going to have a sound bath. We're going to be having a cathartic writing session. We're going to have different ceremonies to help us get on our healing path and to raise our vibrations. So I think it's going to be something super special. It's like a healing boot camp
that's
in the
amazing.
jungle and the
And
beaches. Yeah,
Costa
it's going to be
Rica,
amazing.
when is this?
Yeah. It's July 9th through the 13th.
Amazing. I know
Yeah.
multiple people that have done some type of retreat in Costa Rica and they come back and like their whole life has changed. There's something magical about
Yeah.
Costa Rica. I haven't
It
been
is
there, but I've
magical.
heard amazing things. Have you been?
Yes, 6 or 7 times.
Oh my God. It
I
sounds
used to
very
surf.
dreamy. It's on
Yeah.
my bucket list for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I will send you the details and maybe you'll think
Yes.
about if you
Yes,
want to
I
come.
will. And I'll make sure that everything in our show notes, where to find you, where to find info about the
Great.
retreat, all of that is packed into the podcast show notes so the listeners can find you too. Because this sounds really just absolutely healing and fantastic, and multiple healing modalities that a lot of them, like sound baths, what did you say, Reiki, writing,
Yeah.
yoga, all of these things I have personal experience with, and they're
Yeah.
all amazing. It
Yeah.
just sounds fantastic. I love this. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing.
we're gonna have a cacao ceremony too. I've never done that before with some energetic dance.
Ooh,
It's a little ritual. Yes, I found a shamanic healer, an energy
nice.
healer, Ruti, who's down in Costa Rica, and I just had the most fantastic conversation with her. I had chills from her. I am just so excited to experience these different healing modalities as well. And it's like if you're curious about different ways or you're wanting to know what method might work best for you, this is an opportunity to really experience all of them over 4 days. I'm just so excited about it. And I get really giddy about it because I just think it's going to be an amazing thing and something that will really be healing and unforgettable. I know it is. I know it's going to be that.
Absolutely. It sounds amazing. I haven't done a cacao either, but again, and the people that have gone to Costa Rica that I know, I'm thinking of that have done these retreats, they do that at the ayahuasca
Yeah.
cacao ceremonies, and it
Mhm.
just sounds so amazing. If you are listening to this and this is like lighting you up too, definitely look into it because I've just heard so many amazing things about retreats in general, being with women, going through a similar experience. Like we've said, support groups are so healing, and then you just like layer on the location, all the modalities, all the things, and it really can be very, it sounds like it's going to be very profound. So I will link all of that stuff in the show notes for you guys if you're interested in learning more. Where can everyone find you? Are you like, I know we were talking about before we started recording that we don't like social media, but where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram sharing my darkest secrets. I'm trying to help women understand that they're not alone. It's Karla.Levit on Instagram. Share my life and my experiences and what I'm trying to help women with. And then my website is karlalevit.com, and you can see my different services that I offer there, a little bit about my story too, and then my retreat that I'm so stoked about.
Awesome. You guys, it's all linked in the show notes, so go ahead and check all of that out. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Karla. I super appreciate your candidness and all of just this really good stuff. I feel very calm and peaceful, and just the reminder of just surrendering and really surrendering to what is, but also taking your power back and navigating that tricky balance. I think this was just a lot of great content. So I'm walking away feeling inspired. I hope you are all too. Thanks, Karla. That's all for this episode of The B Word. Don't forget to check out the show notes for any resources we shared with you today, as well as finding our links to our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel, and our website, bucommunity.com. You can find out all of our course offerings, memberships, opportunities to work with me individually, and more. That's all for now. See you next time.